My name is Rasheea Smalls. I am 33 years old. I currently live in South Carolina, and today we will be talking about my life of trials and tribulations that led to a situation where a guy tried to rape me, but God intervened, thankfully. So I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I had a sister that is 3 years older than me. Lived with my mom and my stepdad. My stepdad passed away. Like, I got in trouble in school all the time. I used to always get put out of school pretty much every year. And me and my mom did not really ever have a good relationship. It was a very strained relationship. When I was 15, I moved out from living with my mother and then moved in with my cousins. The day that I moved out, it was just so weird. Like, my mom, she used to, like I said, we didn't have a good relationship. She would like lock me and my sister in the house, and we had reverse locks on the door. So she would take the key so we couldn't get out of the house. And she would also, at that time we had DirecTV, so it had a card that you put inside the TV. She would take the card with her and she would take all of the phones out of the house. One year my sister got a red house phone for Christmas, and I remember right before my sister left, she said, "Rasheea, and if mama ever leave and it's an emergency, it's a phone in the closet that you can use." And I remember my mom got mad at me about something. She left, she locked me in the house, took all the phones that she knew was there, and took the card out the TV. So I was just sitting there. And so I called my cousin and I was telling her, I hate my mama basically, and I want to leave. And so when she left, I called my cousin and told her, and she said, "You can come live with me." I put the phone back and my mom came back in. I remember my mom walked in the door and I was like, "I'm leaving. I'm going to live with my cousins." I said my cousin name, and my mom was like, "Okay." And I remember that feeling like, dang, you're not gonna try and stop me, So she didn't. So she literally packed up all my stuff in her trunk and dropped me off at my cousin's house. I remember it was a Sunday. It was raining, and my mom literally, she unlocked her car door, her back latch opened up in her car, and I took my stuff out and she pulled off. So I was living with my cousins then, and I was 15. They were like 19 and 20. They were married. It was my cousin and his wife. They helped as much as they could, but they were young too. The word abandonment is I feel like it has been stapled in my life since a child, as far back as I can remember. So I've always felt that sense of abandonment and always feeling unloved, not enough. Because it's like if your mom doesn't want you. And my biological dad wasn't in my life either. So it's like, well, dang, if the people who created you don't want anything to do with you, especially at such a young age when your mind is really processing everything and you're kind of learning about life, it can mess you up, in a sense. Because you feel like, well, who's gonna love me? Even before I moved out with my mom, I was always kind of in survival mode, and just kind of, in a sense, just put things in the back of my mind. That's something that I've kind of done pretty much the majority of my life. So much could be happening to me, but I don't really process it. I just kind of keep going. So I was 15 years old, moved in with my cousins, and actually my mom, she came back and started taking me to school. So I was still going to school and everything. She would take me to school, bring me back or whatever. I had to get a job. I was 15, I started working. So I've been working since I was 15 years old. I met this guy that lived near my cousins because we lived in the hood. I was 15, he was 21. And we started talking, and I just thought he was the best person in the world. And it was solely because he listened to me. Because my mom, she never really let us talk, especially if we were trying to bring up something that hurt us that she did. She wouldn't listen to it. He just sat there and listened to me, and that was all that I needed, was somebody to listen to me. So we started talking, and I ended up getting pregnant. So when my mom found out that I was pregnant, she was very upset. She was one of those people that cared a lot about what other people think. And we were raised in the church. So I knew about God and everything like that. She told me, "You need to have an abortion." And I said, "I don't want to have an abortion." I wanted that baby so bad because I wanted to feel that love. I needed to feel that love. And I was like, this baby is going to love me. So my mom tried to get everybody who she could, my cousins, the guy, his mom, to convince me to get an abortion. I wasn't doing it. His mom, a lot of people wouldn't even go along with it. So she got mad. And right before that happened, she was about to give my cousin custody of me. But she cut that off when she found out that I wouldn't do the abortion. And she made me move back in with her, which was the worst thing in the world. Every single morning, she would wake me up 5 o'clock, 5:30. It didn't matter if it was a school day or not. And she would sit at the edge of my bed and say, "Rasheea, you need to have an abortion. This baby's going to ruin your life." All these things, and I just wasn't trying to hear it. Needless to say, I was very stressed living there. One day I went to the bathroom and I realized that I was bleeding, So I knocked on my mom's door and I'm like, hey mama, I need to go to the hospital. And I heard her like turn her lock to her door. And I was like, mama, like I'm bleeding, I can die, I need to go to the hospital. And she wouldn't say another word, would not take me to the hospital. So I had to call EMS, and it took them, of course, forever to come. First thing the doctor said was, if you had gotten here sooner, we could have helped you out. So I lost the baby. And it was so crazy. I don't know who told my mom, like, when I got out of the hospital, but when I walked out the door, my mom was right there. And the first thing she said to me, as soon as I got in the car, we were still in Memorial campus of the hospital. She said, I know you're sad you lost the baby, but aren't you happy you can live your life now? And I was just like, you know. So pretty much after that, like I said, before that, I already hated my mom. And that made me hate her even more. I became way more rebellious. I wasn't doing anything she told me to do. And then at some point, I ended up moving back in with my cousins. The guy that I was talking to, he ended up just being very abusive, threw poop on me and all this stuff. He cut my finger. I still have the scar here. When I tried to stop talking to him, he cut my finger. I remember I was 16 at the time, still in high school, still going to school. And I remember my finger was literally hanging off. I had to go to the hospital. They, stitched it back up. So all that stuff was going on while I was still in school. I started getting into a lot of trouble. I was shoplifting. I ended up getting arrested while still in high school and on probation and everything like that. I was just really in survival mode, in a not caring about anything mode at that time. I just hated my mom. Like I didn't want anything to do with her. I felt like everything was her fault. Everything that I was going through, I felt like she never cared, and that caused me to just feel like, why should I care? Because she doesn't care. Nobody cares about me. That's how I felt at the time. I was just like literally in survival mode, just existing and just kind of like, you know how you do things, you don't really think about what you're doing. You're just like on autopilot. That's kind of how I was. Just like, I'm just doing things. I don't care what happens. I'm getting arrested. I didn't care. I didn't take it seriously. I hated life. I hated everything about life. I was drinking at that age. I was smoking, everything. I was skipping school all of the time, and I just didn't care about anything. After the guy that I had gotten pregnant from got arrested, I was just, like I said, out doing everything that I wanted to. And then I had met this guy, and we weren't together or anything. We just had met downtown one day, and he said, hey, you should come over. We can just chill and stuff like that. And I was, like I said, just kind of on autopilot, not thinking at all. So I went over there, and I told my cousin before I left that, hey, I'm going to hang out with this guy, I'll call you. And I remember we had went downtown. I remember it was over the summer. It was a sunny day. I caught the bus downtown. She caught the bus with me downtown. And he met me downtown with his friend, and his friend drove us to his house. We got into his house, and I remember we were watching 106 in Park, and he had like a little fireplace, and he went up to the fireplace, and I remember him grabbing a box, and he started like sniffing. And I used to, at that time, I used to drink, but I wasn't doing stuff like that, never have. So I was like, hey, what's going on? And he was like, oh, no, it's fine. Da, da, da. And then he started like trying to touch on me and everything. And I was like, no, it's not that type party at all. I just came over here to chill. And he was like, oh, no, we're going to have sex. And I was like, no, you can take me home. And I remember at that time, like I was a very vocal person at that time. I was like talking the most trash. I'm like, oh, no, you're not going. This is not happening. You're going to take me home, and just demanding. And he grabbed a bat first. And he was like, oh no, you're going to take off your clothes. And he told me to take off my shirt. And I remember at that time I started crying, and I was like, no, like, please don't do this. I wasn't that boastful person or loud or anything. I was like, please just take me home. I won't tell anybody. And he told me to take off my shirt. So I took off my shirt, and he started like just rubbing on me and stuff. And I remember at that time I didn't have children, but my little brother, my mom had him when I was 13, and he was like my child. And I remember just thinking about him. I just knew I was going to die. I knew I wasn't going to get out of there. And I remember thinking about him like, how is he going to survive without me? Because we were so close, And so I was just begging him. I'm like, please, can you please just let me go home? I promise I won't tell anybody. And he was like, oh no. And so we were sitting in the front room at that time. And I remember I could see out the door, because he had the door open, but the screen door closed. And I was just trying to think like, if I could just run out here, even though it was so far. I guess he saw me looking, he grabbed the gun, and so he led me into a back room, and he told me to take off my clothes, and I was just begging and pleading with him. I was like, please just don't do this. And he wasn't trying to hear it. And I remember he went into a bathroom, and he said, if you try to leave, I'm gonna blow your brain out. So I just thought of the first thing I could think of, which was to pray. And I remember when I was in Sunday school, they taught us about speaking in tongues. So I started like speaking in tongues out loud. And then all of a sudden, I remember his face kind of did like this, and he was like, stop it. And the more he told me to stop, I just started praying louder and louder and louder. And he just like shook his head, and he was like, no, go, you got to get out. And he called his friend that had taken me, because he didn't have a car, and they dropped me off and took me home. They dropped me off around the corner from where I lived at. And I was just like shook. Just like in total shock. I remember I had went to my cousin's house. I remember I went in through the back door, and I just was sitting in the room crying. And she was like, what's wrong? So I was telling her my cousin, which was the male, he was like, if somebody bothered me, he was going to try to hurt them. So I begged her. I was like, please don't tell him, because I don't want him to go to jail. I don't want anything to happen. And my biggest regret about that is I did not call the police. And I think about that all the time, because I'm like, what if he went and did that to someone else? You know, I knew it was happening, and it was affecting me. You could tell it was affecting me, but I would also be like, no, that's not really happening. I think at that time, it was a couple of things of why I didn't call the police. For one, I was in shock. I couldn't believe what had just happened. But then also at that time, I had so much stuff happen to me at that time. Like basically my whole life was just trauma and a struggle from as far back as I can remember. So it was just kind of like normal to me. I never experienced that before. That was a first. And it was very traumatizing. But then at the same time, it's like, if you are used to, from as far back as you can remember, it always being something, and not just something, but like big things, you know, life changing. I don't even think my wound was healed at that point from my finger being cut, you know. Probably a couple months before that is when the guy threw poop on me. So it was like, you know, it kind of became normal in a sense. Like, this is my life, you know, like what should I expect? Me and my cousin talked about it, and she just, you know, she was there and she comforted me. Like I said, I begged her not to tell my cousin so that he wouldn't go try to find a guy and do something and end up going to jail. So I kind of, like everything else, put it in the back of my head, just kept going on with life. I ended up graduating from school. So that was a big thing. And that was a huge accomplishment, because it didn't seem like I was going to graduate from school. At that point, and from that point, I was like, you know, I don't need to be in relationships, because this isn't really working for me at all. So I wasn't focused on being in a relationship. I was working like 2 or 3 jobs at the time. And I was just focused on working. That was it. And one day I was on the way to work, and I met this guy, and he tried to get my number, and I was like, I'm not interested. And he knew my name. He was like, oh, your name is Rasheea. You live near, 38th Street. And I'm like, how do you know that? You know, we started talking. He would literally, like, I would be catching the bus to work, and he would come like every day. And so eventually he wore me down, and we started talking, and I felt like that was my person. Like, finally I had found somebody who wasn't like everybody else. He had a very good job. He told me he was 21 years old. He had 1 son, and he took very good care of me, which was a big difference for me, because I didn't have a lot. I worked a lot of jobs, but I still wasn't making a lot of money. And so he would buy me phones and jewelry and all this stuff. My family loved him. Everybody loved him. Everybody thought he was just the best person. So one day, I found out that basically everything he told me was a lie, besides his first name. He wasn't 21. He was like 43. He had like 4 children. And it's crazy. When I tell people that, they're like, how did you not know? How did your family not know he was this old? He could have passed for 20, 18, 19. He looked very young. To this day, he still looks very, very young. When I found out that he lied about literally everything, I stopped talking to him, because I'm like, I can't look past this. You've lied about so much stuff. And then when he realized, so he would send me stuff. He would send flowers to my job. He would buy the stuff. And I was like, no, seriously, I'm not interested at all. I remember one day I was at the house, and I got a knock on the door, and it was a sheriff. And I was like, I came to the door, and it was like, is this Rasheea? And I was like, yes. And he said he served me with a peace warrant. And it was from the guy who I was trying to stop talking to. So I remember as soon as I shut the door, I remember just looking at the paper like, why did he serve me? Because the peace warrant said that I was harassing him, and he wanted me to stop bothering him. So I was like, I was just so confused. And I was just standing there, and the minute I shut the door, the guy called. So I answered the phone, and I was like, I don't know why you did this, but now legally you can't call me. Leave me alone. Hung up the phone. He kept calling, continued to call, continued to send stuff up to my job. So I told my coworker what was going on. Very long story short, he started stalking me, threatened to kill me, all of these things. It was just a very crazy experience, and that is one of the experiences that affected me the most. I was like 18 when I met him. We stopped talking when I was about 21, and I'm 33 now, and sometimes I still am like, looking behind my back, because he told me, he said, it doesn't matter how long it takes, I will find you and I will kill you. And somehow, I don't know how, he just kind of always knew where I was. I ended up going to the police because one day I was showing a property. I used to work in property management, and he was in a totally different car. He saw me and started following me. So it was literally my car, his car, and the police. The police was like talking through it, telling him to pull over. He wasn't pulling over or anything. And they had ended up going like on high speed chasing all this stuff. So anyway, he ended up getting arrested, thank God, and left me alone. But that definitely, like everything else, just seemed like, hey, this is my life. Dramatic things just happened to me. This is my life. It took a very long time for me to get to the point where I realized that I was not the things that happened to me, that I have value, and that I can have better in life. I went through just a period of alcoholism and depression, not wanting to live, of course, trying to end my life several times. And it wasn't until I remember I picked up smoking cigarettes, and my daughters, I have 2 daughters, they're 15 months apart. And so they were like 1 and 2 at the time. And I kept telling myself, I said, before they can understand what I'm doing, I'm going to stop. And I used to, when I say alcoholism, I would wake up in the morning, before I brush my teeth, anything, I would go straight to the refrigerator and like down bottles of wine. I used to be a straight alcoholic. I lived off alcohol. I would drink all day long. I was a very high functioning alcoholic. I had a job, a very good job, had my own place and everything, but I was an alcoholic. And a lot of people didn't know, but I was constantly drunk. And I just got to the point where I was like, this isn't life. My children don't deserve this. They deserve a good and healthy mom. So I just prayed and I asked God, like, please take this taste for cigarettes away from me. Take this taste from alcohol away from me. And he did. And it was very hard. Very, very hard to like not just grab something, when those tense, tight feelings come. So once I went through my healing journey, I just began, looking at life for what it is, realizing that life is beautiful. Since I was 18, I wanted to write a book. I knew that I had a story to tell, and I thought that I had it then, but I didn't know I had like a whole lot more life to live. This was in 2021. It was the day before Thanksgiving. And the thought would always come in my mind like, oh, you need to write the book, but I would never really do it. It was the day before Thanksgiving of 2021, and I just heard God tell me, go to Walmart. And it was a specific Walmart I felt that I needed to go to. It was like 30 minutes away from my house. I had to pass all these different Walmarts, but I knew I needed to go there. So I went to Walmart. I took one of my daughters with me. She was 3 at the time, so she was being a 3-year-old in Walmart. I grabbed more than I needed, kind of forgot why I was even there, because I knew God was saying, pay for someone's food. So my daughter started having all these temper tantrums and stuff, and I was just like, by the time all of that, I forgot why I came. So I went to the self-checkout line, and it's the minute I scanned my last item, I was like, oh snap, I'm here for a reason, and not because I had prayed like, God, put the person behind me so it'll be easy. So anyway, so I started walking through the aisles. I was just like, God, whoever it is, like, please reveal it to me. So I'm walking through the aisles, and I get almost to the very last aisle. So I saw this lady, and I said, hey, I walked up to her. I was like, hey, did you pay for your stuff yet? She said, no. I said, well, not me, but God through me, I'm going to pay for your stuff. And she was like, well, praise God. So that was that. We talked for a long time outside. And so she said, well, you don't know this, but you sowed the seed into a life of a prophet. She said, I want to pray for you. And I was like, please do. So she said one word, maybe God or something, I don't know. And then she stopped and she looked at me and she said, write the book. God said, write the book. And I just started busting out crying. I was like, I know it, And it's like, from the moment she said that, all the words that needed to be in the book, the way it is written, just came flowing out of me. And I wrote that book in wrote and published it in like 2 and 3 months. And so I love it. It's called Rasheea, an Overcomer's Testimony. A lot of people have a very, very hard time saying my name, so that's why I named it this way. But I love it so much. Like, I'll go out in public. I always have a book with me, always. And I love talking to people. So I'll stop people and say, hey, do you enjoy reading? It don't matter if they say yes or no. I say, well, I just published my first book, and I tell them what it's about. And that is, to me, like my ministry. I get so fulfilled doing that because I meet so many people. I don't care if I'm at a gas station, a store, wherever. I'm going to stop somebody and ask. And I share my story with them. And then they share their story with me. Because one thing I didn't mention is I was diagnosed with endometriosis, stage 4 in 2014. And there's no cure for that. One day I was supposed to have surgery September 19th, 2019. And the doctor told me a week before, on the 9th of September, that I was going to need a colostomy bag for the rest of my life. And when they told me that, I was going to commit suicide, because I was like, I've been through too much in life. You know, my children were 1 and 2 at the time. And I was like, I can't like live with that. That's just like too much. So I went home, got my children situated. I wasn't going to do it while they were home, but I was going to do it before that surgery. So I wanted to like write out letters to my children and stuff, you know. So I went in my room and sat down to write out my goodbyes, and something told me to pray. So I prayed and I said, God, you create the heavens and the earth. I need you to work a miracle in my life. I said, when they're going on Monday, I don't want them to find no endometriosis. In Jesus' name, amen. And that was that. And so I went in that Monday for surgery, and the doctors were like, Ms. Smalls, you seem like you're feeling better. Because endometriosis, if you know about it, it is a very painful condition, and I was always in pain. And I said, God, help me. And they said, well, we go to church, we believe in God, we understand faith and all that, but yeah, like it's not possible. And I said, well, can we pray since y'all believers? And they said yes. I said, God, they're the professionals, but you create this profession, show them what you can do. And they looked at me like a clown. Like, okay, you're not getting it. But when I woke up from that surgery, all of that severe stage 4 endometriosis was completely gone. That was 4 years ago. I share that with people because, just like I was saying, the stories that I hear on this channel are like, they're sad but also very comforting, because we're all going through something, and hearing like I'm going through something as well helps people know that you can make it through. Because when you're going through stuff, I definitely know it feels like the ceiling is right here on your head and you can't breathe. But then when you hear like, okay, somebody else went through something very bad and they made it through, maybe I can make it through too. That's my ministry, is just going out and talking to people, letting them know what I've been through and hearing what they've been through, and letting them know it doesn't matter what it is. Nobody can tell me anything that's going on in their life and that I won't say it can change, because I know it can. I was going to end my life. I was ready to be done living. I saw no purpose to living. I remember for years waking up and being like, literally, I would wake up and be angry that I was up. Why do I keep waking up? I remember that feeling, like just being so angry, like why do I keep waking up? You know? But I'm glad I didn't. I'm here for a reason.